immediately staking a claim in the center. This opening aims to establish a pawn duo for future piece development and control. Developing the knight toward the center immediately contests white's central influence and prepares for potential queenside expansion. Opening a vital diagonal for the queen and solidifying central space, this pawn push immediately contests the initiative and prepares for further development. Black prepares to develop the kingside bishop, solidifying the center and setting up for queenside expansion later. Solidifying the center and preparing kingside castling, this move offers flexibility for white's development. Establishing central control by challenging white's pawn structure and opening lines for development. Solidifying the center while developing a piece, this move aims for harmonious piece play and prepares for pawn advances like e4. Solidifying the pawn center with c6 prepares for a robust queen's gambit decline structure, aiming for ultimate pawn chain stability. Solidifying the center's pawn structure, white prepares for piece development while maintaining a flexible setup. Solidifying the center's pawn structure and preparing for queenside piece development harmoniously. Securing the queen on this diagonal offers central control and prepares for an eventual kingside assault. Developing the bishop here on d6 aims to free the c8 square for the rook and prepare for castling, though it blocks the d-pawn's advance for now. Developing the bishop to this square prepares kingside castling and connects the rooks for future play. Securing the monarch amidst the developing central tension, this castling offers immediate safety. Securing the monarch is now the priority, creating a safe haven from potential central skirmishes. This maneuver elegantly unblocks the f8 rook and prepares a potential advance on the kingside, subtly eyeing white's king's safety. Opening the d-file for the rook aims to prepare central pawn breaks and challenge black's pawn structure, building pressure. Capturing the c4 pawn relinquishes central control, opening lines that might benefit white's queenside pressure. Recapturing the pawn opens the bishop's diagonal, eyeing the kingside. Preparing to challenge the queenside pawn structure, aiming for queenside expansion. Pondering a pawn advance, white aims to seize additional territory on the queenside, potentially hindering black's development. Embracing the center's struggle, this pawn advances to seize central space and challenge white's pawn structure, aiming to open lines for black's pieces. Striking at the pawn center, white invites a pawn exchange, potentially freeing the d-file and opening lines for an assault. Capturing the pawn enriches the knight's position and sharpens the central struggle for squares. Opening the center decisively, this pawn advance immediately probes black's pawn structure and aims to seize central space. Rerouting the knight to d7 seeks to bolster the e5 square and potentially redeploy to c5 or f6. The bishop eyes the queen's diagonal, preparing to disrupt black's central control and potentially exploit pawn weaknesses. Unleashing the knight towards white's kingside offers attacking potential, but risks leaving the d5 outpost exposed. Opening lines for the king's bishop can create attacking chances, but it might become a target if black can advance the d-pawn. Sacrificing tempo, black aims to disrupt white's harmonious piece placement, opening lines at the cost of development. Exchanging the bishop opens the f-file for the rook, potentially pressuring black's weakened king position. Developing the bishop to a central, active square aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and potentially create attacking chances. Shifting the queen to d2 aims to prepare a kingside assault, potentially involving e4 and g4, while keeping an eye on the kingside pawn structure. Unifying the queen with the bishop's diagonal establishes a potent attacking setup on the kingside. Establishing dominion over the central files becomes paramount, preparing for potential pawn breaks. Shifting the queen to b8 aims to unpin the knight and potentially prepare for pawn advances on the queenside, a subtle yet important repositioning. Reinforcing the king's pawn shield, this subtle preparation aims to finally unburden the f3 bishop. Unleashing a queenside pawn storm, black aims to disrupt white's tightly packed formation. Exchanging the bishop here simplifies white's position, creating an open diagonal for the queen. Opening the g-file creates immediate attacking potential, but significantly weakens your king's safety. Re-establishing bishop control on the diagonal secures more influence and prepares potential kingside advances. Bringing the rook to the 7th rank offers excellent attacking prospects and supports potential advances on the kingside. Unifying your rooks and preparing for a kingside pawn storm by clearing the way for the queen signals a shift towards aggressive intentions. Initiating a pawn storm on the queenside, challenging white's central space and aiming to create counterplay. Rerouting the knight to a more active square, potentially targeting weak pawns or supporting a kingside advance. A thoughtful repositioning, this rook aims to contest the d-file and support a potential kingside advance. Anchoring this wing with a pawn advance, white prepares to free the queen and potentially contest the central files. Capturing the rook on d1 immediately opens the central file, forcing a difficult decision for white regarding recapturing and pawn structure. Opening the d-file now allows white to challenge the isolated pawns and potentially create attacking chances. Reclaiming the queen to potentially pressure the weakened kingside pawns after white's rook trade. Opening the f-file offers potential attacking routes and aims to disrupt black's pawn structure near the king. Reactivating the bishop to a more active diagonal, this move offers flexibility and potential counterplay. Securing the king is paramount before launching any significant offensive action. Unifying the bishops on the queenside aims to exploit the open lines, but neglects central control and king safety for now. Unleashing the f-pawn creates pawn chain dynamism, but opens lines toward your king, demanding careful defensive placement. Shattering the pawn shield around white's monarch unlocks dangerous diagonals, albeit at the cost of structural integrity. Unlocking the f-file opens avenues for a forceful kingside attack. Focusing the rook on the open d-file now attempts to disrupt white's pawn structure and create counterplay. Opening the e-file, white ignites a tactical skirmish with potential for decisive complications. Unleashing the queen to a bolder outpost now opens dynamic counterplay against white's exposed monarch. Simplifying the position decisively, this exchange initiates an endgame where your rook activity will be paramount. Accepting the queen trade solidifies the pawn structure, but the doubled pawns now create weaknesses. Aggressively pushing the g-pawn now seeks to exploit kingside space and open lines for your rook, but weakens your king's shelter. Unleashing the bishop to g5 disrupts white's pawn structure and prepares to contest the central open file. Reclaiming the central file offers a chance to reposition your rook for better control and potential breakthroughs. Securing the monarch's escape route with this maneuver subtly prepares for eventual central pawn advances. Opening the g-file now offers a direct assault path to the enemy king. Activating the rook along the d-file now prepares to challenge white's central pawn structure. Sensing the opponent's weakened king, white shifts focus to centralizing his monarch for a potential attack. Sacrificing a rook here creates immediate open lines and threatens the exposed white king. Unlocking the kingside, this exchange opens lines for the rook's resurgence. Unleashing the bishop to contest the open files, aiming to disrupt white's central pawn structure and improve black's piece activity. Securing the king's escape route, while aiming to activate the remaining pieces, is a logical defensive maneuver. A passive development, allowing white to solidify control over the central files and potentially launch an attack. Bolstering the queenside by creating a protected passed pawn out of thin air. Re-establishing a defensive presence on the queenside, aiming to hinder white's advancing pawn and restrict piece mobility. Bolstering the kingside pawn structure secures the monarch and prepares potential future advances. Repositioning the bishop to the long diagonal aims to challenge the d4 pawn and potentially open lines for queenside counterplay. Opening the king's avenue, white aims to exploit the exposed black monarch for a decisive assault. Opening the bishop's diagonal, and challenging the pawn chain now frees the knight for active play.